What happens when two seasoned business leaders get together? They talk shop, of course. Sit back and listen in as Scott DeLong and Vince Moiso share from their experience around current issues facing executives, entrepreneurs, and their leadership teams. The CEO Podcast starts now.
Hey everybody, Scott DeLong with the CEO Podcast. I'm here as always with my partner, Vince Moiso.
Hey guys.
And we have a special guest today, Mike Lee. I met Mike through an organization that we both do some work with called Impact 11. And it's been a wonderful relationship that I've had with these folks, and Mike being part of that is a natural to be on our podcast. Mike is a leadership expert. I'm going to let him talk a little bit about himself here in a minute, but I do want to make sure that I put this out. He's got a new book being released this week on Amazon, and it's called New Rules for the Future of Leadership. So when you resonate with the podcast today, just jump on Amazon and buy a copy of the book, right? So the New Rules for the Future of Leadership by Mike Lee. So Mike's got a sports background as well, just as Vince and I do. And I'm sure that's formed a lot of what he came up with. In fact, we're going to ask a couple of questions about that. But Mike, if you take a minute and just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from, and what you're hoping to accomplish.
Yeah. So thanks for having me on, guys. I'm super excited to dive in with you today. My background is from a very small town in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. Started running a summer basketball camp with a buddy of mine that went from one small summer basketball camp while we were in college, actually, during the summers. That went from a camp that had a couple hundred kids that showed up during 1 week to quite literally an international brand. Worked with a couple dozen NBA guys, ran camps all across the world. And that led me to start to rethink my life a little bit. I kind of reached I guess I wouldn't say the pinnacle, but I'd reached a place where you had done a lot of the things that you thought were going to make you happy, and they didn't make you happy.
Yeah.
It was like, when I first started out, it was, I got to work with college basketball players. Then it was, I got to work with overseas pros. Then it was, I got to work with NBA players. And it was, at what point is enough, right? And I just realized it's, you guys are both former athletes. It's like you win the national championship, the conference championship, whatever it is, you win the big game. And then what? And so
going to Disneyland. Come on, Mike, you're going to Disneyland. That's what's next.
Yeah. So it's like, I kind of got to this point where I was always chasing the next thing. And I'd always dealt with depression my entire life. I decided to pick up and move out of Wisconsin because the winters were incredibly hard, and move out to LA purely for the weather. It was the only reason that I moved out. And I moved out here, and I decided to get off an antidepressant medication that I'd been on at that point for about 14 years. And getting off of it was quite literally like getting off of heroin. Board certified doctors at UCLA have now studied this, and that's what they've compared it to. And so, as you can imagine, I was an emotional disaster. But I knew there was no way I was going back on this medication. And I decided to commit to a daily mindfulness meditation practice. And everything in my life changed. I realized why elite athletes like Kobe and CEOs like Steve Jobs and luminaries like Oprah all attributed a meditation practice to at least some form of their success. And so at that point, I realized that I had a deeper purpose in my life. And instead of building basketball players, it was to build people and to build leaders. And it's really turned into this methodology for the future of leadership, where we are combining this elite athlete mindset, the focus, the discipline, the resilience of an athlete with the empathy, compassion, and connection that you would attribute with more of a spiritual leader. And I think, in our world today, it can't be either or. We can't be solely driven by KPIs and shareholder profits. And you also just can't be this soft leader who's all about empathy and compassion, right? It's like both of you, you can think about the most transformative coaches that you probably had, and you can speak to this, right? Is they showed up with both, right? They held you accountable. They challenged you. They pushed you harder than you ever thought that you could go before, but they did it from a place of love and a place of compassion. And I think we live in this world where we try to separate them, but the truth is that the most transformative leaders apply both. And so that's where I'm at today.
The word I was thinking of was care, right? That they're talking about these transformative coaches, not only push you to hold you to standards, but they showed care and concern for you as a human being, as well as the team, certainly. Hey, there's a line in your website that I read earlier today, and I'm going to read it here because I want to make sure that I get it right. I just loved it. It says, "You can set yourself up to inspire, impact, and influence your people, your organization." Here's the part that I really like, and maybe even the world. That was brilliant. Love that sentiment.
Yeah, it's I think it all comes back to just being there with people in the moment. It's like, I think I'm not one of these people who, I'm starting this movement and I'm going to change the world and this and this and this. It's like, no, it's like, just be there with the one person that you're in front of. Be there when you're speaking to the 500 people that are in the room, or 1,000 people that are in the room, or the 50 people that are in the room. And it's like, maybe we can't change the entire world, but we can change how people experience the world. And I think if we just, I think like these when we talk about changing the world, it's like it can be such a big, overwhelming thing. But I think we just focus on the people that are right in front of us.
Yeah, just one at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
Mike, I saw it's great, Scott. I saw the same thing, and I loved how that was said. And Mike, it made me think of a story. Scott's heard this one before, but I was listening to an NFL coach speak. It totally changed the way I speak and coach and teach and lead. I was at a coach's clinic. It was actually a football coach's clinic. And man, like some of the top NFL coaches were there. And every single one of them got up and talked about X's and O's, except for one. And he got up and talked exactly about what you're talking about. He talked about the responsibility of a coach to be transformative, that changing young men to be future leaders, right? And the responsibility that coach had and the impact that they were going to have on that athlete's life. And it was such a departure from what every other coach was up there talking about, right? They were talking about offense, defense, tactical things. And he came off, and it was interesting because I talked to him afterward, and I said, man, you totally blew my mind. And you think that you really impacted anybody? And he goes, I just need to impact one, just one. And there were 1,000 coaches in the audience, right? And all he cared about was impacting one, because he knew by impacting one, that would become exponential, right?
Yeah.
And it totally changed my outlook, because I remember prior to that, anytime I was stepping into a room or going to speak, I was thinking about how many people I could impact. Then once I changed that to, if I just impact starting with myself, change myself, and then can easily impact one person or anybody around me, you totally change your environment, which is exactly what you're talking about. And it sounds like that's what you did. And good on you, because it's freaking life-changing.
Hey, Mike, I want to ask you a little bit about this. There's another phrase that I saw as I was looking through your work: the counterculture approach to the future of leadership. Define that for me first, and then let's get into that a little bit.
Well, I think I already kind of explained some of that from the standpoint of this external focus on profits and being the sole purpose of a business. I think one thing that I truly believe in wholeheartedly is that business in general is probably the most powerful force to create social impact.
Absolutely.
I think, especially with, we could really dive in. That could be a whole conversation, but I think, the nonprofit world does good, but like the resources are so limited with so many of them. And I think if you can leverage your business to, create some sort of impact, you don't have to, everybody doesn't have to go out and start a nonprofit or have a charitable arm, but there's so many different things that businesses can do to create impact. And I think it's a different approach. I think, and it's going to be needed. Like 20 years from now, the kids who are, 6 years old and 15 years old right now, coming into the work, like they are so much more aware, and they are so much more, they
informed,
they're informed, and they have different values and a different viewpoint on life. It's not work 30 years, buy a house, save for retirement, and then I can have fun with my life. It's like, no, I want to find fulfillment and create impact now. It's like, why wait? Why do I have to wait?
So we talk about that a lot, about the different generations, and some of us older folks, we're always looking down on millennials and Gen Zs and all that. And I keep telling my people that, listen, right now they're 50% of our workforce and 50% of our customer base.
Yeah.
We raise them to be these individuals that they are. It's not them that has to change. It's us. It is my generation. And even, Vince keeps telling me how much younger he is than me. Even Vince's generation that has to make the changes, because they are our future, and they're not wrong.
I totally agree. I mean, I think as a leader, you have to meet people at the level that they're at. Like if we want to influence people, we have to meet them where they are. Like, we have a different perspective of the world because of what we've gone through. Like they don't have that perspective, and they only know what they know. And you have to meet them at their level in order to influence them. And I think, I look at, there's a coach that I had that had a massive impact on my life. And, whenever we'd work out together, we'd do individual workouts, we'd always play music. And we'd get in the gym and he would crank the music up. I could barely hear him. But the thing is, it's like, he would always let me pick the music that I wanted to listen to. Mm. Like if it was his choice, it would have been a completely different thing, but it wasn't about him. It was about me. Yeah. And I know for sure that there is no way that he would ever be listening to the music that I was listening to on his own while he's driving home after the workout, right? It was about me and meeting me where I was at in order to influence me. And so I think, leaders can apply that in so many different ways, right? So many different ways. I mean, I'm sure both of you have stories about coaches that met you at your level in order to. I'd use
my daughter as the example. So, I grew up an athlete, and my older daughter was an athlete. And so that was easy for me to fall into and become a youth coach, and then, graduate all the way up to coaching her in high school. But my younger daughter, they couldn't be. My two kids are total opposites. My younger daughter was just very into theater and music and arts, and just completely different. And she excelled at it. She loved falling into that. So she's very accomplished on the piano. She's a very accomplished singer. She's in college now. She's at the University of San Diego. But I had to learn this whole new, I've developed this whole new love for theater and music, and through her eyes and through her experience. And at first I resisted that, because that wasn't me. Right. And then I recognized, well, it's not about me. This is about her, and if I want to connect with her at a higher level, I need to connect with her in what she likes the most and what she's all about. Totally changed. Once I did that, once I made that shift, it completely changed my relationship with her. To this day, she's 21 years old and we're incredibly close. And I love going to experience those types of things with her. But I think that applies. What I've also learned is to apply that with those that work for me, with those that are around me, with like, the more you can repeat that, the more connection you end up having with those around you.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I spent so much time observing parents and the relationship that they have with their kids. And it's, this is totally off topic, but not really. We'll circle it back. But, one of the main complaints that I get from parents would be like, well, Billy he doesn't want to practice enough. He doesn't want to work hard enough. I try to get him to do his dribbling drills in the morning and this and this. And I'm like, and I asked him, like, well, do you ask him if they actually want to be a good basketball player? Like,
right.
Like, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, they tell me this and they tell me that and they say this. And I'm like, you need to quit paying attention to what your kids say and start paying attention to what your kids do. And then find out what they love and then go all in on something that they love instead of trying to push them to do something that
100%.
they don't. And all you're going to do is destroy the relationship that you have with your kid.
Totally.
And, I think that can be applied to all dynamics of relationships, right? So
yeah, especially like when you talked about bringing that back to business, and I, Scott does a significant amount of coaching in my business, and my teammates love him, and we incorporate a lot of this in there, is just the discovery process of what they want from their employment experience. So I learned that lesson a long time ago the hard way, is thinking that, my best performer wants to be a manager, or they want to be in this other role, or they want to make commission, or whatever that might be. I stopped telling them and assuming and started asking, what do you want? How do you want to grow? What does that growth path look like for you? And how can we make that a reality? And once I started doing that, you start having happy employees, engaged employees, connected employees. It totally changes your business. Big surprise, right?
So my lesson in that came in the business world. I mean, I've certainly made my share of mistakes with my kids as well, but in the business world, I spent several $100,000 building a system for gentlemen that worked for me who happened to be my best friend, building a system that he just absolutely didn't want to do. Right. It was $250,000 experiment, because I thought I knew best for what his life was what he wanted out of life. Didn't want anything to do with what I was building for him. Right. He went through the motions because, I was doing the thing, but it's like, damn, why don't we find out? Why don't we ask?
Yeah.
Right?
Just ask.
So that's gone into one of my philosophies that I use with clients, with myself, with my family, with everybody, is rather than, I used to be this command and control style leader. When I'd tell people what to do, they would do it, right? So I've got a new philosophy, and it's just ask, not tell. And it just works so much better with people, finding out what's in it for them, what motivates them. And that's why I liked earlier in that quote, you used the word inspire rather than motivate. And there's a big difference, right? We can motivate people with carrots and sticks. If I told you stop saying that word, I'll quit beating you, you'll stop saying the word, right? But as soon as that stick's no longer there, you'll go back to doing the old behavior. But if we get this inspiration with people, we never have to motivate them ever again. We just don't. They do it themselves.
Yeah, no question. And that's why it's so important to find out what drives them. What their why is. I mean, then they take more ownership in their work. They're more engaged, right? They want to stay. And so I think, it's nobody wants to be motivated, but everybody wants to be inspired.
Yeah.
And so it's, but it goes back to what you're talking about. You have to ask, right? We can't project our own experience of life onto somebody else. I mean, I've done the same thing in multiple, just different scenarios where it's like, wait, you don't want to you don't want to be a CEO. You don't want to be a head coach. You don't want to coach in the NBA. You do, like, what? I don't get it. Cause it was always, for me, it was like, wherever I'm at, I want to be at the top. Right.
Yeah.
And I realized that other people have different objectives, and I can't make my decisions based on my own projections.
Let's take a step back now. Let's go back to something you said earlier, because I know that your approach has a lot to do with self-reflection, right? And it is starting inward and starting with me. Describe your meditative process. What is it that you do specifically to get you into that state, to get you into that feeling that you're where you need to be?
Yeah, for me, it's simple. It's a mindfulness meditation practice. It's changed form quite a bit over the last 10 years or so, but it's a simple, very simple practice where, when I first started, I was using Headspace all the time. It's a mindfulness app. Well, now they're way more than just mindfulness, but when I first started, they were just a mindfulness meditation app. It's really about finding your center, finding the still point, right, within your mind, so that you can make decisions and be in alignment with your values when the chaos and adversity surrounds you. Mm-hmm. And how I do it, I mean, very simple, is just 3 different focal points that focus on go through a body scan, do an audible focus, where I'm just focusing on sounds in my environment, and then a breath awareness, where you're just watching the natural rise and fall of your breath. Those are really the 3 big things. I mean, it's very, very simple, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. And I think people can what's the word that I'm looking for? People can devalue the practice because of how simple it is. But I think both of you probably agree, it's the simple things that we do consistently that actually make the difference and add up over the long run. And I think that's true in everything. And so,
while simple, not easy. So tell me what you do. Like, we all have these problems. Like, we're trying to be mindful. We're going to go into this meditative state, and all of a sudden the world starts creeping in, right? This thought, that thought, this thing I've got to do next week, or the thing that's coming up. What do you do to clear that? What's your technique?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. I think one of the big misconceptions, we talk about sustained focus all the time when we're talking about high performance. You're talking about sports, right?
Yep.
Both of you have had a coach probably yell at you to focus, right? Scott, you got to focus, right?
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
The thing that we miss is it's not so much about sustained focus, it's about sustained awareness. And when we become aware of when our mind is drifted, when we get pulled out of the task at hand because of some email notification or whatever it is, then we're able to redirect our attention and our energy back to the task at hand. So I think it's really, you can't do any of it without awareness. That's the first step, right? I have to be aware of where I'm placing my attention and my energy in the moment, right? And so I think and you can cultivate that through a meditation practice. Yeah. You're training yourself to observe your thoughts, to observe your emotions, to observe your feelings. And then you start to observe other things, and you create more self-awareness, right? So I think the first step is that, and then it's just it might be as simple as just recentering yourself back on the task. It might be taking, 3 deep breaths. It might be, maybe it's something that you're really feeling overwhelmed about. And it's like, you gotta get out of that environment. You got to get out of your head. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that we can think ourselves back into a state of focus, when the truth is that we really have to get out of our head, get out of our rumination, get out of our thinking patterns, get into our body somehow. That maybe it's some sort of movement. Maybe it's you just go for a walk around the block. Maybe it's you do a quick 2-minute exercise series, whatever it is, something to break that pattern, right? And so those are a few things.
Right.
Yeah,
So there's,
Mike, I
go
I,
ahead,
I was
finish.
gonna comment that the Headspace app is great. I still use Headspace, and it's so funny. Some of those techniques, I'm reminded of, what I was taught and doing so many different series through the Headspace app, which was, Scott, in answer to your question, those thoughts are always going to come. You're always going to get hit. And I know for me personally, I was a big resistor, right? Like I would resist it. Oh, wait, I got to fight this, right? I got to keep this from happening. And what they say in the Headspace app, in several different series, is let it happen. You gotta let it happen and let it almost flow through you, and then shift the focus to the breathing. So what I've learned through it, they have a sleep series, and it's really helped me with sleep, because I think a lot of times what happens to many entrepreneurs or high performers is our mind is always racing. We're always thinking of the next thing. We're always thinking of how to get better, whatever that might be. And that carries us into even laying in the bed. And we have a hard time falling asleep sometimes. And so when that happens to me, I immediately shift my focus to my breath, or a check in with the body, as Mike was talking. And now, like, it happens so fast. I'm off it in 10 seconds. Like it can happen so fast. And then next thing you know, I'm dead asleep, and it's done wonders for that. But I no longer, the change is I no longer resist it. And
Yeah.
I think it's so natural for people to resist those feelings. And I think that's the number one thing to get away from.
So for me, it's a combination of a couple things that I end up doing, because this happens to me all the time. I try to meditate daily, take 20 minutes and go and doing what I'm doing, and the thoughts come in. The first thing I focus on is breath work. I mean, I go back into that. I've practiced breath work enough that now, because I know the state I want to get, it just usually takes one deep breath and let it out, and I can get to that spot. The second thing that happens is if the thought and idea is not going away, somehow I've turned it into a cloud, right? So I've labeled it, it's turned into a cloud now, and it kind of just floats through and just kind of floats out, and I just let it float away. And I've never been stuck when I've tried to do these things. So it's been wonderful.
Hey, Mike, I wanted to ask you one thing, because I know we're getting close to approaching time. This always happens on our podcast. Scott and I love these type of conversations, and I feel like we could go forever. But we try to limit for our listeners. That being said, one thing that stood out for me is you talk a lot about distraction, and we have a lot of distractions that we have to contend with, right? And the other thing that you said in conjunction with that is you talked about the concept of multitasking and the myth that is. And I was immediately, Scott, probably when you saw that, you were probably laughing.
Yep.
Because that's right up my alley. I love those concepts. And I immediately thought of the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, which is where I really learned, how to get rid of distractions. And because there are things that you can do literally immediately, which is turning off notifications on your computer, turning off your text notifications, all the things that we set up in our life, or that people are trying to set up in our life, that totally distract us from our focus. And then, I also thought of a couple of other books too. Atomic Habits by James Clear, one of my favorites. The One Thing by Gary Keller, where we talk about focus tasking rather than multitasking. And, I think once I learned that, and totally just got away from the fallacy of multitasking, totally changed, a lot of things that I do throughout my day. But I'd really love to hear your take on that, because I'm sure you probably share a lot of that in your book. And so can you go deeper on your end, some of the things that you do to get rid of those distractions?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I overlooked for a long time was really setting up your environment, right, to be distraction free. Sometimes I'll literally take my phone and I'll put it in a different room.
Yeah.
I think one of the, like, a very tactical thing that I do is I will set up, I have I don't know exactly what the name of this app is now, but I used to have an app called Focus Timer. And there's a bunch of them. They're for your computer, for your desktop. And essentially it allows you to set a countdown timer that is on the top menu bar of your screen, or I don't know where it would be on Windows. But I'll use that and I'll focus on a task, whatever it is. Like I'm working on a rebrand right now. So today I had to finish one task in this rebrand, and I set the timer for 30 minutes, and I kind of treat it as if I'm doing a drill, right? Like I'm an athlete doing a drill. It's like I got 30 minutes to complete this task, and the timer creates a psychological trigger for it to help you lock in on that task. So that would be one very, very tactical thing that I would suggest. Yeah.
Well, folks, we are at time. Mike, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and sharing some of the stories that you have. Folks, the new rules for the future of leadership is coming out this week, and you get it on Amazon. I'm going to highly recommend that if this made any sense to you at all today, pick up a copy and read it. Leave a review for them too. That really helps. So, Mike, you want to tell people how to get a hold of you other than that?
Yeah, best place is either on LinkedIn or Instagram at Who Is Mike Lee. Websites, mindshiftlabs.com. Feel free to drop me a message and we can continue the conversation.
Wonderful.
Great stuff, Mike. Thank you. Yeah, man, I enjoyed this topic, as you can tell. Learned a lot. I love that you used the word mindfulness too. I think that's a word that is really penetrating, a lot of high performers and a lot of leaders at this point. And I think all of us can learn a great lesson from it. So thank you for sharing and appreciate you taking the time to come on today.
You're welcome. Right. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. And as always, you can find us on all the normal channels. So questions, concerns, you can get a hold of us at scottandvince@gmail.com. Obviously, Mike at the mindshiftlabs.com. And folks, we really appreciate you being here. So until next time.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thank you for joining us for the CEO Podcast. Please visit us at theceopodcast.net, where you can learn more about our co-hosts and listen to past episodes. If you would like to have a discussion and dive deeper into any topic, there is also an option to contact Scott or Vince to schedule some time with them. Thanks for listening.